This is a making of the cosplay of the Undertaker from Kuroshitsuji, or Black Butler. This is part 1, the wig and hat. And we need to start with the wig, the very important wig. I started with a ridiculously long white wig that I got at a con last year. I brushed it well before starting, then split the hair, some for the fringe or the bangs. Then I marked it out with elastics, a rough approximation of the length, so I can rough cut it, just so I don't have to work with all of the hair, because this wig has a lot of hair, and I really don't want to work with all of it still there. It's just impossible. I split it into smaller pieces so it's easier to cut. The Undertaker's my favorite character. My original got destroyed, so I don't think I ever had a wig for that one. I had really long hair, just painted that, and it was a really long time ago. I wouldn't even know where to find a wig that long. And then put it all together again and put that away for last. We need to split a couple of the layers, the top layers of the bag. We need 2 separate layers. One will be above the other to cover up the mess. That'll give it more volume. Top layer will be slightly shorter when we cut it. After we split the 2 layers, we start with the bottom one. We mark out the approximate length again. We use some elastic to mark the approximate length, and then we use a second elastic because I want to keep the leftover hair to use on other wigs and stuff. That way it keeps it from getting all tangled up, more or less. And we cut between the elastics, roughly but somewhat carefully. We repeat the process for the top layer. It should be just a tiny bit shorter, but doesn't really matter here. Second elastic and cut. we start teasing. This is what's gonna make it kind of more puffy. It gives it volume. It's not really gonna look like that at the end. It's just to give the hair a bit of texture. But basically we just tease the hell out of it and heat it up to keep the volume and the shape, sort of. We do occasionally need to brush it out a bit so it doesn't get too messy, because we do want soft spikes and we don't want all of that mess. We just want the volume. So if it starts getting too tangled, we brush it out, then tease again and heat again, and tease and heat and tease and heat until we're happy with the volume. Then we brush it out a bit and move on to the next bit. We do this in bits just because it's a bit easier. That is all the top layer. Actually, the bottom layer. I just split it into smaller bits to make it easier. Tease and heat and tease and heat. That's all we're gonna do for this part. Just repeat the process all over this layer quite a few times, but just making sure you can always kind of get it back to the soft version when you brush it out. Once we're happy, we heat it up, then let it cool down and brush it out again. We split the hair into smaller bits again. Again, this is still all just the bottom layer of the two that we have for the back. It's just split into smaller bits. Now we start cutting each of the sections into pointy ends to make it easier for later. Not sure why, but it works better if you cut up into the hair instead of down. At least for making it pointy. Then we straighten them out a bit. To get back to the soft hair version that we had when we started. And now we get the steamer. Best thing ever, by the way, for wig styling. And we start shaping up those spikes. They're gonna need to kind of curl up at the end, so that's what I'm doing. Just making it pointy and curly. Slowly shaping it with the heat and my hands at this point. And now we start using hairspray. Just a little bit at first, Just to start getting the shape. We're still gonna need to cut a bit more, so we shouldn't use too much on the ends yet. Just mostly heat and shaping with the hands. And then I cut a bit more to get it a bit more pointy. I'm still gonna split each of those into 2 pieces later, so I'm not cutting too much yet. Just kind of getting a pointy shape. Repeat the process on all the parts. Just heat and shape and heat and shape. And then apply a little bit of hairspray to start getting it to a point. But not too much on the ends because we need to cut them. And glue's gonna make it a bit difficult. Absolutely impossible to do with real hair. I've tried. I don't think I had a wig from my original costume, because wigs were really hard to find back then. It was a really long time ago. So I just used my own hair. It was impossible. Once we're done, we straighten the tips, just the tips of all 3 bits we have. And we cut a little bit more. Then we apply heat again with the steamer to try and make the curly bits at the end. Before I start spiking. Then we split from the middle of the hair into 2 ends. Straighten each one of them separately and apply heat to make it curl away from the other. Before we start shaping up the spike. This is where we do the final cut and really properly make them pointy, while still keeping that strange little curl up at the end, which is what I'm doing with that thing. You can apply a bit of hairspray here and there to start making the points for the hair to start sticking together so we can properly shape them. Once everything is nice and curled up, we cut up the ends, we apply hairspray, and we make it spiky. At this point you can apply as much hairspray to the ends as you need to and shape them up with your fingers before applying the heat. Then just let them rest for a few minutes with hairspray after you apply the heat on the whole thing. Let it cool down before you start working on the next one. The next layer is pretty much the same, it's just not gonna have as much teasing. And it does need to be a bit shorter, which is why I'm rough cutting again. The light's getting a bit weird now, but we repeat the process exactly the same. We brush, we split into small bits, we tease and heat up, then brush it out a bit and tease again. Heat up, tease, heat up, tease, then let it cool and brush it out. This one you really need to brush it out. It needs to be like really soft. We're gonna need to straighten it probably. And then split it into small bits again to start styling. Curling them up, straightening and curling up. Then cutting it into pointy ends. Applying hairspray, just like before. Shape up the tip. Apply the heat. Every time, heat is what keeps it together. Then we shape up the tips with the hairspray and heat. the finished wig. Well, the finished first part of the wig. Now we move on to the fringe, or the bangs. We split them into small bits. This part doesn't really need that much work. You just heat up and kind of curl it up first, bit by bit. Just brush it, heat it, curl it up. The Undertaker does have some ridiculously long bangs. They're like meant to cover his eyes, I think. Pretty sure. So, yeah, really long. It should cover half your face, basically. As you can see, starting to take shape already. You can apply some hairspray and make it pointy, like the back. I had to dye mine first, because it was white. So I didn't do that yet. Here. Now we split a little bit of the bottom hair from the right side. Important, right side. We brush it out and cut it a tiny bit shorter than the rest, and then make a braid. Just a regular old braid, nothing special. Just make it pointy at the end. Apply some heat to make sure it doesn't come undone, or too much at least. I used a black elastic because I just didn't have anything else to use. Then cut the excess hair. Make it nice and pointy like the rest. A little bit more heat just to seal up everything. And here's the whole thing all done. See, it's looking like the Undertaker already. I used a bit of acrylic diluted in water in a spray bottle and sprayed the wig a little bit to make it a bit more gray. Fixed it up again. Now the head. We measured our head and used the height of a chopper head that I have. It's 13 centimeters. And used that to make a pattern for the hat. It's just a rectangle. We cut that out of 5mm EVA foam and close it up with hot glue. Then mark the circle to make the rest. The rest is just a full circle for the top and the bigger empty circle for the bottom. They're all cut out of 5mm EVA. We put all the pieces together with hot glue and let it cool for a while before trying it on. If all is well, we cut out all the parts, pretty much the same, but out of fabric this time. I used the burned part of my old Undertaker coat to make the hat, so I had to cut most of the pieces in half. If you have a full fabric, you probably don't need to do this. But I needed to cut 2 parts for the rectangle. They should be the same, but mine aren't because of the burned parts. In the end, the seams are not too visible, but they are a bit, so if you can, make it one piece. Then I made 2 half kind of circles for the bottom of the hat. I cut that 4 times, 2 for the top, 2 for the bottom. Then just 1 for the top, obviously. The top does have that weird little thing that comes out of it, so I made a little circle in the middle that's gonna be cut out for the thing to come out of. The thing's just gonna be a long tube of fabric that ends in a pointy end. So just cut a really long strip of fabric that fits into your hole, obviously. Make sure to cut all the pieces with at least 1 or 2 extra centimeters around for the seam allowance. All around. And this is how you reuse damaged fabric, I guess. I did love that coat. I still have the top part actually, just changed it up a bit. I guess I still have the bottom too now, just on my head. As you can see, my half circles will now go together. I pinned them right sides together before sewing. I'm gonna pin all the pieces together first. As you can see, 2 half circles. Again, for the bottom part, because it has 2 layers. Then we cut the middle of the top for the little tube to come out of. Here I'm testing out my first piece of the long strip that's gonna make up the tube. I'm a bit restricted on fabric, so it's gonna have 3 pieces, I think. About the same size. The last one can be a bit smaller at the end, because we're gonna cut it into a point eventually. Check the size, then pin up all the pieces to make a very long strip of fabric. Remember to always pin the right sides together to make sure the seams are on the inside of the piece. Here you can see my mismatched rectangles. And now we sew everything that we pinned. Starting with our circles. For the bottom of the hat, I don't know the names of the parts, I'm sorry. I don't make a lot of hats. Just a lot of Undertaker hats, I guess. It's my third one. Maybe the best one. Like I said, I made the original costume a long ass time ago. Then I made the Ciel in Wonderland version, the Mad Hatter version for Halloween again. And this is my third Undertaker. Unfortunately, there are no pictures of the first two. Death thorns and all. We sew up all the 3 pieces of the tube, we close it up. Again, making sure the right sides are together and all the seams are matching, and open. Usually pin over the seams to make sure they stay open the entire time, then remove the pin before sewing to keep from breaking the needle. Now we cut the end a bit rounded because it's easier when we flip it over to make it pointy that way. I don't know why. Less fabric or something, I don't know. Then we sew up the whole thing, making sure all the seams are very wide open. I did a zigzag stitch on this part I probably didn't need to because the fabric doesn't fray anyway, but just in case. I don't have a serger, so the closest I have is a zigzag stitch. Two bottom circles together, and we sew around the outside. We need to put the two layers together first on the outside, and the inside will be open in case I wanna line the inside of the hat later or something like that. Again, make sure all the seams are open. And matching. Then we need to flip back to the outside so we can sew it in place. Since it's a rather large tube, it's not too hard to just do it by hand. Now we need the skeleton of the hat again. We start by putting the bottom right side to the outside and putting it around the EVA. We're basically dressing the hat now. Then we hand sew these two parts together. Just because I think it's easier to make sure it's all pretty much in place and you can adjust as you go along to make sure it doesn't look weird anywhere. Then we pull all the fabric down and we kind of start putting hot glue on the inside and putting the fabric in place. I did it all at once because I'm stupid. But if you do it slowly, it's a lot easier. Just make sure the fabric doesn't touch the hot glue too soon. using hot glue because I want the little folds and stuff to kind of stay where I want them. And it's easier like this to kind of give it the look I want. You can skip this part if you want. But it just kind of looks like that in the anime and the manga, and it just looks kind of cute and messy, and I like it. Then we do the same with the top. We sew it up by hand again, always leaving a good centimeter of fabric inside for the seam to not come undone. I sewed up around the hot glue to hide it inside as much as possible. And just closed it all the way around. And then I hot glued the bottom part as well. Slowly and bit by bit, because I learned from my past mistake. The same on the underside too. Not too close to the edge, because I might want to line it later, if I have the time. Or when I have the time. And now we sew up the tube, making sure the back seam is matching with the back of the hat. And here we have a cute little Undertaker hat.